In the book, you talk about active recall and free recall. A question that I had is, are they different or are they the same?
Okay, so active recall, and I mean, this is how I've been using the term, but I talk about active recall versus passive review. So that's the binary distinction that I'm making in there.
Okay.
And so active recall is any kind of situation where you have to remember something from memory rather than looking at it. Free recall is the free and free recall is a more specific paradigm that they were using in some of the studies, which is the like close the book, I don't have any questions or prompts. So one could argue that doing homework problems is a kind of active recall because they're giving you a question and you have to do it, but it's not free recall because free recall is just there's nothing there. And so, again, I don't think that's sort of pedantic nitpicking. I think they're probably, you can use them interchangeably for a lot of purposes. But in the book, when I'm talking about free recall, that's what I mean is the close the book. I have a blank piece of paper. What do I remember? But I would say, doing flashcards is a kind of active recall, but it's not free recall.
What the thing that I would question is the purpose of free recall then, is that just to see what you've remembered rather than active recall is specific on a certain topic or hypothesis?
Well, no, I think free recall, the main advantage is you don't have to have any material, right? So you can always do free recall. But if you don't have questions, let's say you're listening to this podcast right now and I paused it. I'm using my magic powers. I paused it and just asked you, what were we talking about? I could give you some questions and you can answer them. And like, presumably if I'm the person deciding what you should be gaining from this podcast, I could design the questions in a way to test you on what I think is important. But I don't have those questions for you. But you could still pause it and see what you remember. Like, oh, what was he talking about this or something? Like, if you assume you want to remember. But and you could do that, and that would strengthen your memory. And the reason I think free recall is important and why I highlighted the Jeffrey Karpicki studies that were done using these free recall paradigms is because, first of all, it doesn't require any material. So, like the classic, well, yeah, I would do practice tests, but I don't have practice tests, doesn't apply to this line of reasoning. The second reason I think it's important is it distinguishes two different effects, which again is a little nitpicky, but people think that the reason that you do homework is to get feedback, so see what you got wrong, and that is an effect, and I talk about it in the book. But there's lots of studies showing that merely the fact of testing yourself, even if you have no idea what you got right or wrong, you'll still do better. So recall is independent from feedback. Recall still helps you prepare for a test, even if you can't evaluate what you're recalling. So closing the book and doing free recall, even if you never open the book again, it will help you. And so obviously it's better to do both. And so this is like kind of an unnecessary, distinction. But I point that out because I think a lot of times when I talk to people, the way they view doing homework is I want to test myself and check what I know. And I really want to assert that it is the act of trying to remember things that strengthens this kind of, you can imagine there's kind of a search pattern in your brain to retrieve information given, some kind of vague prompt. And the strengthening of that is a major component of learning. And if you don't do that, if you just look at it, it's a lot harder. And so, there's lots of examples of this, but the free recall is like a more narrow term that refers to this, like close the book, just see what you remember. But I would include active recall, any kind of studying habit where you have to remember things and can't look at them, but that could include homework, that could include problem solving, that could do doing a project. Those are all active kinds of learning, whereas, sitting and watching a video, re-looking at your notes, that kind of stuff is passive.
Thank you for watching this video. To listen to the full podcast, click the link in the description below.